What a round of footy it was. The AFL CEO, Gillon McLachlan's been good enough to join us here on Talking Footy. That must bring a smile to your face, Gill. So many great results in one round.
It was an unbelievable round of footy. I was at the Hawthorn-Essendon game. That was a cracker. There was games going on all around you and all close, compelling football, and with so many swings and roundabouts in the 8, it was unbelievable.
Hey, Gill, on a lot of measures, it's been an extraordinary year. Record membership, you're on track to break the all-time attendance record. Stadium deal negotiated, I think, has probably been underappreciated for how big that is for the AFL. Do you get frustrated at times that little parts of what you say gets dissected and there's a lot of negative press around at the moment, given there's a lot of good news in football?
One, it's part of the job. Two, I'm sort of a bit more glass half full in that when we're talking about footy, it's all good. So when we're debating and people are aggravated or things, we're talking about football and it's great. And it's a sign of that footy is going well. We are getting record attendances and that's what happens. We're a big part of this town and a lot of cities and a lot of towns, and that's the upside of success, really, I think.
Gil, I found something very fascinating about you just the other day, and before you became the CEO of the AFL, you might have been courted by Liverpool in the EPL to go over there and potentially be the CEO. Is there any truth to that?
Courted's probably a bit strong. I had someone reach out, yeah, but it was not much more than that, and didn't get very far with my household. My wife didn't really like the sound of living in Liverpool, so it was pretty brief from both sides.
No, it would have been good if you could have got there as well, Gilbert. You've taken on this job and done really well at it. Hey, listen, the last few weeks, I reckon there's been some pretty good footy. And I was one for changing the rules and thinking, oh yeah, probably got to do it, probably a few problems. But when I look at the last 4 or 5 weeks in context, I go, wow, there's been some pretty good footy. I know you're not part of the team making those decisions, but they'll eventually cross your desk. Yep. How do you feel about it, given the last 5 or 6 weeks?
Well, there's always been amazing football. We've got the best game in the world, and I'm pretty proud of it, and I don't think the best of our football's ever been better. They're so athletic, so physical. But I guess Steve Hocking's come in, and congestion has been an issue in some games for some time. We've been talking about it for years. And part of his remit as the head of football is to look at football. And that's what he has done. He said, right, well, let's have a look at it. It's the biggest issue when we talk to our supporters. It's been in the media. It's been an issue for clubs. And so what he's doing is come in as the new head of football, and he is running an extraordinarily wide and consultative process to look at the rules. And it's a key part of the head of football. It's a key part of their job. And what I do know about Steve is he's got the competition committee with 14 people representing all the clubs. You've got presidents, CEOs, heads of football, coaches, others on there. Yep. Good mix. And they are all, Steve's very experienced, they are custodians of the game. So if they make change and recommend change, it's certainly not to detract anything from games like we saw on the weekend, but to be as much as we can like that. And as they look at it as custodians of the game, I think they'll do it with a process that they had. I feel very confident if they make change, it'll be to be best we can be all of the time rather than trying to detract from say the weekend.
Is there a rule that irks you that you would change? That
as a
like if I was the CEO?
Yeah, like, no, if you weren't the CEO.
As a football lover?
Yeah, as a footballer.
I've always been a bit on holding the ball that I think prior opportunity has been given too long. And, I chip away at that. But, again, there's a process, and that's just my view. I think that players are so talented and so amazing. They can take possession and have weighed up about 4 options to get rid of the ball and decided not to because all of those they didn't like, and they'll take the tackle, and that's the one for me.
I've got one for you, Gil. As an all-Australian amateur ruckman, people might know that the Talking Footy audience will.
It was a pretty thin few years.
So it was a fine player in your day. The ruck nomination rule, and we had a fine example at the weekend with our umpire Cam. Just have a listen to Jack Rewalt and then the farcical nature of the fact that he's got to stand there and not compete for the ball. Let's have a look at this.
Ball. Richmond ruck. No Richmond ruck. Thank you. Play on.
What do you think of that, Gil, when you see a player stand? I nominate, got to stand there and not go for the ball. Does that frustrate you?
Yep, I'm conceding that, yeah. We've got to fix that up. I know Steve's onto it. And whether it's as simple as if there's a third man up, the team
Penalise them.
Yep,
get
just penalise
penalised.
the
Maybe that's in the team takes responsibility. He's looking at that. He'll change that. I'm very confident at the end of the year through the competition committee.
Let's talk about free agency. Tom Lynch. Is it fair that the worst club, best player at the worst club, gets to the best club?
I don't know if it's free agency per se that you should look to there. I mean, is it? I think if Tom wasn't a free agent and wanted to change, history says in the last few years they'd get there through trade anyway.
Not too many top players are going to want to go to a poorer club than they're at, or someone at the same level.
And people have their moments where they're in tough environments. I've got great confidence in Mark Evans. He's been there 18 months and he's made dramatic change. We've got a new coach, list manager, head of commercial, head of football, and they are working on creating an environment for success at the Gold Coast. And that's happened over the journey at lots of clubs. If you look at where Port Adelaide were when David Koch took over and Ken Hinkley came in, when you look at Brisbane 2 or 3 years ago before David Noble and Chris Fagan have come in there, and that's the job ahead of them. People, I think, get a bit distracted by individual trades or movements like that. That's the job of the Gold Coast Footy Club. They've got a lot of talent there to work to develop that list and to create an environment where they have success.
I've made it my responsibility this year to make the match review officer and hold them to account. Done a pretty good job this year, Michael Christian, but I think I saw one of the worst decisions I've seen of the year. Let's have a look at the vision here. Can you try and explain to me how Aaron Francis, for that beautiful bump, there's 2 minutes on the clock, the game's in the balance, 50-50 ball, how he gets fined $2,000 for that, Gil?
So should he have got more or should have got...
No, how was he found guilty of anything in that contest?
Was that was clearly today?
Today.
I don't know what the technical grading was, but...
Rough conduct, I think.
Rough conduct. I mean...
Did that look excessive?
The thing about the MRP or the MRO and the adjudication of our rules is that it is incredibly, at the margin, huge debate. And we can all have different views on so many of them. And I was having a conversation about in the context of the red card, because we'll all see things differently. I think generally he's doing a great job. I think people like having one person who then articulates it clearly, and then we can debate it and we'll all have different views. I'm not going to pick apart that one and cut across Chriso, but what I do know is that I think generally the process is working better, but we're always going to have ones where we see it differently, whether it's intentional versus careless, whether it's medium versus high, heavy contact.
You mentioned the red
That's the
card.
game.
Is that something that you're an advocate for, or?
I have not been historically, no. I think I played in the amateurs where send-off applied and there was inconsistencies there. I think if you did it, you couldn't really go to a video referee. I think the umpires would have to make a call on the spot. And I think our system generally works very well. For 1 or 2 incidents a year, I think the deterrent is clearly there. We don't see that stuff much in our game anymore, and I think that we have a system of accountability that works well generally.
A lot of questions coming through for the AFL-CIO. Sam McClure has been collating, and a few of your own. Sam, what have you got?
Gillon, good evening. Tom Brennan reported during the night about Carlton's priority pick. Can you just clear up for us, Gillon? Do Carlton have to nominate, or does a club have to nominate for a priority pick, or can the AFL, through its own discretion, give one?
Oh, this sounds like one of your questions. It is. I don't reckon we can get anyone else's questions.
Sam from Richmond.
I think it's certainly by convention that clubs nominate for or request a project, and I think that convention should apply. Technically, I've had the guys look at the rules, and technically clubs don't need to, but I think the convention applies. I saw Kane, Carlton CEO, before, and we've been having ongoing discussions with them. They very clearly want to get through and focus on football at the end of the year, and I think the door's open them to change their position or to have a conversation with us like they've been doing.
So their position could change?
I'm sure it could. I mean, we're having discussions with Carlton about where they're at. He's determined, Kane, under his leadership, to focus on the football, but they've had a tough year.
I promise you a social question, so I'll give you one. Paul Smythe asked the question, Gillon, why don't you like the idea of having Tasmania having its own team?
Well, I like the idea of it. There's just a whole series of challenges with that, which we've articulated at length, but they are a proud football state who I've said historically deserve their own team, but there are a whole series of different issues that we are mapped out a plan for with Tasmania over the last month or so.
And last one on socials, Gillon. Leanne Monticelli asks, how much will it cost to go to an AFLW game next year?
Again, a whole series of decisions being made on AFLW at the moment. My instinct, without getting ahead of all the process, is free.
Gill's going to stick around, keep the questions coming through as we discuss Ken Hinkley's explosive claims. AFLW on the agenda as well. Grand final entertainment, lots to run past Gillon, and so too a big game of Friday night footy. Welcome back to Talking Footy. The AFL CEO, Gillon McLachlan, our special guest. They were pretty harsh words from Ken Hinkley. You've been playing a nice straight bat tonight, Gill. Should the AFL be embarrassed by the score review, as Ken Hinkley suggests?
No. Well, I've looked at it a number of times, and I think most people say that the score review was right. You can't conclusively say that hit the post. I actually looked at Josh Jenkins might have thought that, but the Port Adelaide guy who was right underneath the post was dejected and was walking back, and he didn't think it hit the post. So I'm not saying it didn't. I'm saying that there's no conclusive way you could tell that it did from the vision, and so the score review was right. It's an emotional game, but I don't agree with what Ken said.
Did Kenny get sent a please explain for that, or you don't send them anymore?
No, to his credit, I know Ken and Steve have spoken today, and I think that was the right way to deal with it. They actually square it away, and and I think everyone understands the emotion of a loss like that. And I know Steve does as an experienced football guy, but also it was very good of Ken to reach out to Steve and square that away.
We are very quick to pick up on the one you get wrong. There were 3 in the Essendon Hawks game off the boot that got 100% right, and they would have normally been given goals, and they weren't. So,
I didn't think you'd talk about this tonight, but I just happen to have this knowledge. There's been 122 score reviews this year, and there's 3% the umpires have said were wrong.
Yeah.
So there's meaning a lot of decisions, over 100 have been corrected and we're getting the right decision, and it's working generally well. There's been other discussions around that about, okay, but what about different technology then rather than score review? And there's been 5 or 6 options I know have gone through football operations that are just, there's as many issues with them as problems they solve. And
talking about improved scoring, what about if the ball actually hits the post and goes through for a goal? Has that ever been considered? And vice versa, if it hits a post and comes back into play on?
Yeah, I'm having hard enough time just to get people to have a look at the game itself before I wade into that. I think I'm going to rule those out, and people have looked at that. But if it hits the post, it's a point, and you kick it in, and I think that's a rule that's here to stay, and someone else can look at that.
AFLW, Gill. Daisy Pearce was not happy with the way that next season was being planned. She's got some thoughts here of a nine-match season, as we'll take a look at those on the screen in just a moment, over a final series of just 2 weeks, a normal Final Four setup. Let's have a look at them.
Doesn't sit well with me or a lot of the players is the temperature that I'm taking, but I thought when those 2 new teams came in, I was rubbing my hands together thinking, we're going to get a legitimate competition here. Seems not to be the case, and in reality this is a gimmicky tournament.
And there they are, start of the season a little bit earlier, 9 home and away games for the 10-team competition, a couple of weeks in finals. Is it possible to fit that in?
Yeah, if everything's possible, BT, and no decision's been made. We're going through a long process. There's a women's competition committee looking at all the decisions for season 3 of the AFLW. They are meeting again tomorrow night. I know there's a paper on fixtures that are different. The things they're debating are the length of the season and what's the right amount of games. When you start it for maximum impact to start the season strongly, working with broadcasters and others on what they want. I know that most of the clubs and players want to finish, if they could, before the men's season start on that bye weekend and give the grand final the best clear air. I know, and I agree with this, we should be playing a prelim final now we go to 10 teams. So trying to work those together is what they're doing. There are a number of different options, but you can, if you want to start on the 5th of January, get that fixture away. There's no doubt about that.
So that hasn't been set in stone at the moment. I thought just the reaction to it, and you made a bit of a reference on radio about the length of the World Cup, and you've been smashed in every quarter. I mean, would you take that comment back, or are you just sort of frustrated by what seems like an overreaction?
I liked it.
Well, there's others have said that. You're not meaning to cause offence. My point in real time was to say that is an event that only goes for 4 weeks. It's a huge thing. It captures people. Not everyone plays each other. It's not supposed to be completely analogous or disrespectful. It's just to say 8 weeks, 4 weeks. Anyway, what I said and what I believe is we're still working through this. Daisy's, a leader in our game. Her opinion's incredibly important. We'll hear from the Players Association directly in the coming days, and all that will get weighed up.
Hey, Chris Judd, former Carlton champ and also a director at Carlton, had a couple of interesting things to say about the Suns.
I think if Gold Coast people are dirty on Tom Lynch, it's absolutely ridiculous. If anything, they should be apologising to Tom Lynch. They should say, look, we're sorry. We drafted you as a kid. The environment we created for you wasn't up to standard. We've cost you 8 years of your career where you had no chance of succeeding. We're sorry. Thanks for putting in. You go with our blessing. Yeah. That's the line they should have taken, not to pretend that they're some sort of the victim. It just shows that they really don't understand what players go through, what players sacrifice, and the way they've managed some of their injuries in the past. I was flabbergasted that anyone in there would begrudge Tom Lynch after what he's been through for 8 years, the bulk of his career, to explore other options.
Strong comments from Juddy, but given that he's a Carlton director and where the Blues have been for some time, is that a conflict of interest from Juddy, do you think?
I don't know whether it's a conflict, whether you're talking to how Carlton are going.
Could argue Paddy Cripsy would be Paddy Cripps would be pretty upset about how his club's gone.
Yeah, all I'd say is that Chris is a respected figure. He's working there clearly in the media. He's got his view. It's been, these players leaving clubs are emotional, and clubs, I understand Gold Coast standing their ground, and I understand what Chris is saying. I think all clubs get emotional when star players leave, and I think that's been consistent over the journey.
But that's not his club.
Talking about them? Yeah, well, I think he's talking as a media commentator, and that's what he was doing.
It's an emotional game. Sam McClure has been all over the social media. Sam, what's happening?
Gillon, we had, unfortunately, one of the lowlights of the season yesterday at Optus Stadium with Andrew Gaff and Andrew Brayshaw. It's sort of reignited the debate about whether we need a red card. Can you see in the foreseeable future an AFL code that has a red card in it?
No, I mentioned that before, Sam. I think I'm happy with the judicial system we have and the accountabilities we have. I do believe players are held accountable, and I do believe generally it is a deterrent for acts like that. I don't know that a red card would have changed anything about what happened yesterday in terms of the action. It was a terrible incident that was, we're thinking about young Brayshaw because it was just a terrible incident, and he'll be held accountable the right way for something we do not want to see on our field at any time, on any field across the country.
One last one from me before we get to a couple of socials. If you had your time again, would you not have floated on radio that we could trial some of these rules in AFL games late in the season? Because you backflipped on it 48 hours later.
No, I didn't backflip. We had a conversation. I actually love the fact we can talk to the public. People want to jump on either side. There's not one part of that I would take back or regret. I said, I'm interested. What do you think, Jared? He actually, or whatever he said, and we have a conversation. And there's a lot of people that actually thought it was worth looking at. And then when the majority don't, you have a conversation with supporters about something that goes to integrity, and you can make the decision. That's actually quite helpful for me.
So it was actually your way of sort of taking the temperature for the issue?
Well, I'm raising questions all the time that we then get to monitor during the course of the days and the weeks afterwards. It's actually quite helpful.
Okay, Simon Kenny asks on social media, are you considering the 17-5 model anytime soon with the fixture?
We've had a look at this. The challenge with it is a couple of things. You deal with it. There's a lot of upside to this. There's a couple at the end that say, okay, if the 5 then are deciding the top 6, the teams that finish 5th and 6th play teams at 7, 8th who potentially, or if you look at it statistically, have had a softer draw. And then what happens with the bottom 6, and are they sort of dislocated from the main draw. If you look right now, there is huge swings around. Brisbane almost beat the Kangaroos in weekend. That would have been a big shift for the Kangaroos. So that they're playing a role, and teams are improving and playing a role in shaping the 8, and they are very relevant. They're as relevant as some of the teams in the 8 in doing that, and there's a challenge then they might be dislocated, and they're the couple of things that are stopping that going ahead.
AFL entertainment is a really important topic that I want to talk to you about. You nearly got the Foo Fighters a few years ago. Can you make an exclusive and tell us who you've got this year? John Bon Jovi or an Australian artist like Conrad Sewell?
Conrad Sewell. How do you? What do you know?
Unbelievable. Healing hands.
No, we will. Clearly, that will be announced in the coming weeks. I can't help you much with that other than to say the Killers are unbelievable, and we'll have someone very good this year, and no Foo Fighters.
No Foo Fighters.
Hey, just on the Andrew Gaff incident, given the severity of that, and obviously the tribunal will deal with that and there'll be an outcome, and I think we all know which way it's heading, should that affect in any way his inclusion or non-inclusion in the All-Australian side?
No, it's best players only. The best and fairest applies to the Brownlow clearly. So, I think then it's incumbent upon the selectors to look at his on-field performances, since
of which he's a lock.
Suspension is not a criteria.
Couldn't let you go, Gillon, without asking this final one from Shane Harris. What were you thinking when you wore this cap?
Are you making these names up, Sam?
I can't comment on that.
He's definitely making that up.
That one did look suspect.
He was like, what are we going with?
Answer the question, please.
You wear one mustard jacket and it haunts you your whole life.
I've still got that if someone wants it.
That goes into the AFL museum, that one.
The worst thing about that is I sort of quite fancied myself as I walked out. I didn't really get the feedback I was after.
Stick around for a second, Gil. This is where we do the Gillette Pro Glide Defensive Player of the Day, brought to you by Gillette with flexible technology for your closest shave. This week goes to Hawk Ben Stratton. If you saw Ben Stratton play on the weekend, he was unbelievable, your old teammate Brownie. Plays a bit like Gary Ayres. He looked like Gary Ayres. He took that crucial defensive mark over Orazio Fantasia in the win over the Bombers, and he has been enormous this year, Brownie, your old teammate.
He's been superb. Very underrated, Ben Stratton.
Marking everything.
Yep, he's going well.
Gil, we really appreciate your time. In a big year, it's been a really successful season. Good luck. Feel like the final series is going to be very, very exciting.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything 3 weeks out quite like this. There's extraordinary 3 rounds coming up, and hopefully a great final series. Thanks for the support, guys.